the deep listening, like as bards, like what did we do? We were receiving stories from the earth. We were singing up these tales from the land. Yes, stories, folk stories passed down. Total respect to these old stories, myths, folk stories that have been passed down from mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth over. Such power in that. And why is there so much information at this time that wants to be spoken and shared? Why is my heart and my mind and my imagination flooded with imagery and feeling and characters that want to be spoken into existence and then just travel on their way? Like, what is that about?
Oh my days, this is a phenomenal episode. I know you're going to get so much value from this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. A lot goes into this production. A lot goes into this podcast. If you would like to support, then please hit the subscribe button and tap like. This is the best zero-cost way to support the podcast. And if anything comes up for you in this episode, the best way to interact with us is in the comments section below. So please do that and enjoy and devour the conversation. Samantha Rose is a beautiful soul who has an amazing mission and has chosen a path and a way to live that really aligns with me and the podcast mission to learn new ways of interacting with the world, or maybe they're old ways that we once forgot, to reconnect ourselves with the animate, the life that we are surrounded by, how to make life sacred again. Enjoy the episode. Please, again, subscribe if you find this valuable. Appreciate you. Enjoy the podcast. Samantha Rose.
Hi.
There is no real formal introduction to this podcast,
Okay.
so we'll just begin.
Mm-hmm.
How are you? How are you feeling? How's the cacao?
Energized.
I can feel it.
Like my heart has just opened.
Does cacao feature in your lifestyle?
It does.
In your ceremonies?
Ooh, I would like it to more.
Mm.
Day to day, sporadically. I really enjoy putting mushrooms in them.
Okay.
Playing with the mushrooms.
Yeah.
What did we have in that one? Lion's mane.
That was reishi. Pretty sure. Lion's mane is for the evening. Or is it?
What a way to start a podcast. Supercharge.
This is always going to be a supercharged podcast. Yeah. So it doesn't. When you hold space, you don't have cacao in that ceremonial space.
Not usually, actually. No. I have people that come and will say, can I bring some cacao? Can I share some raw chocolates that I've made? Can I cook for the event? So I often find that the ceremonies are a fusion of what people bring and what people want to share and what people want to offer. But I would like it. I've been thinking that cacao in ceremonies, it would be really nice to have more of that feature. So yeah, maybe in the future.
It's powerful medicine. I often feel like, on a global scale, what has cacao done for men? Because for me, from my experience, it's been hard in previous years to access emotion or access like what's going on in here, in this space. But cacao just really allows you to feel. You feel your body kind of does its magic, and you're like, oh, it kind of does open. It does feel nourishing, and then like emotion does come, especially if it's in a held space with that as a facilitated thing. So what's it doing for men that allows them to just go deeper when it's hard to connect sometimes, and it's nice to bring in tools and medicines to actually allow to deepen our experience.
Absolutely.
What would you say allows you to deepen your experience?
In ceremony or
just in
day
life,
to day?
in day to day, yeah. What are the things that you...
I'm just day to day engaging in different creative mediums, like constantly. So some days I'll have my art materials, my books out, and I'll be sketching and drawing with crayons and maybe watercolours, if that's what I feel inspired to do. Other times I'll feel the need to go out walking with the trees, with the land. Sometimes listening for stories, sometimes just communing like we did earlier, just being with the trees and grounding myself. Sometimes movement, free form, free flow, just playing some music and allowing my body to move, and writing, like stream of consciousness, just allowing the pen to move across the page and seeing what wants to arise. And these are the tools that change every day. But it's funny, wherever I go, I've got this little backpack, my little kit where I've got my speaker, my art materials, just like portable stuff that I can take. And I'll find myself just like sketching underneath a tree. And I wouldn't call myself an amazing visual artist, but it's a bridge. And I feel like with information that's coming through, there's all of these channels, creative mediums that we can use to bridge. So I think to deepen, I would say it helps me deepen into myself, into what I'm hearing, into what I'm receiving. And that I often feel calmer after I do it. There's like, I've just heard, or I've listened more deeply, and I can see more deeply, and it might not make sense. But that, yeah, I've had some kind of exchange. So yeah, creativity has really been there with me for many, many years on a wandering path. Yeah.
Beautiful. What gets in the way of those things? What are the obstacles that get in the way of all the things you've just explained?
I mean, the classic "I'm not good enough" piece, right? I can't draw.
Perhaps a story that you're not good enough, right?
Totally.
So the stories
totally.
that you tell yourself.
Totally. And I've moved through a lot of that. Like that belief I'm not good enough was huge in the beginning of my journey, from growing up. And I've done a lot of work to look at it, to clear it, to understand it, to replace it with a feeling and a knowing and a belief actually that I am good enough. I wouldn't even say replace it. It's almost like when you realize that's not true, actually what's underneath is just the feeling I'm good enough, who I am, how I am. I don't need to be anything more than that. So the belief that, like, the beliefs that get in the way of creating can be so crippling, for me and for a lot of the people that I work with. But also time, like what you and I were talking about this earlier, like what are we doing with our time? You know, where are we placing our focus? How many hours of the day am I on my phone?
Digital devices get in the way.
And really consciously having to put it down and like actually off the table, or take myself out and go, for the next hour I'm walking out of the house without my phone, and this is time for me to listen, or this is time for me to write, or this is time. So it's like physically removing
It's
the
crazy
technology
that that's so radical.
from the picture, literally just for an hour or 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I think also realizing that we don't have to spend hours, that it's more accessible than we think. And I think often the biggest hurdle is just going to pick it up. Literally going to get the book, or going to get the journal, or going to, and then when it's open, it's like, it just happens. But yeah, it's something in that moment of choosing, the choice. Yeah.
Making the decision to do something. I often say that when I'm opening for an event or something, I'm like, you've done the hard thing. Like, you've made the decision to come here. Now you just need to be present to the experience. But yeah, making a decision and choosing and just staying with that, being disciplined enough to just commit.
And not just once. This is the other thing, like to sustain, say, a practice over time. For me, it's a balance of not putting too much pressure on myself that I have to do it. You know, if I'm like, I've got to do this thing every single day at this time for this long, the teenager in me is going to reject and rebel against that every time. I can sustain it for a while, but then there's a part of me that wants to do something else, or is engaged with something else. So like, if we give ourselves permission that it's okay to put that thing down, and then it's okay to pick it back up again, you know, like what is inspiring us in the moment? What do we feel drawn to want to do with our energy, with our creative energy? So because creative energy for me in my body is constantly changing and it's asking me for different things, so it'd be too rigid to create a practice that I always had to stick to, which is where the listening comes in. You know, what is needed for this moment right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really fascinated about that. I am not enough, or the thing you said before. I'm not good enough.
You know that one?
Yeah, I'm interested. It's a powerful one. I think a lot of people know that one.
Yeah.
In our culture, a lot is predicated on us not being enough. So then we need the thing, then we need the product, then we need the course,
exactly.
whatever it might be.
Exactly.
So there's all these signals from a very early age that we are not good enough, or we're not enough. So we have to have something to make us enough. But of course it doesn't work like that. So how do you think, could you dive into that a bit, and maybe from a woman's perspective, what that journey has been like, and where do you think the root of that really was for you?
It's such a big question, because this is years, right? This is a belief that maybe it sounded like overnight it disappeared. I think the intensity of that belief reduced over many years. And I can remember so clearly growing up because of maybe a series of factors from young childhood, but teenagehood specifically, high school, just feeling the weight of that on so many levels, like not good enough, not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not... You can think of all the enoughs. Like it was just this empty, there was like this empty well in me that nothing that I brought in could fill it. I could see it on my face. I could see it, in the weight, the puffiness around my eyes when I was younger, just this kind of absence, I'd say. And I was able to come into contact with it, and this is what's coming to me now, is realizing that I didn't want to walk with that, is realizing that it was crippling me so much, and it was feeling like such a huge weight day to day, that belief and the feelings and the beliefs that came with that I started to, with myself, just because I was being, like I've said, I felt called to speak out loud that I wanted to let it go. And it was really that, like going back maybe 10 years ago, having very conscious moments with life where maybe it would start by me just standing next to a tree or standing next to the ocean and setting these intentions and saying, I release this belief of not being good enough, and then using the ocean, using the water. I grew up in Australia, so it was easy. I was in and out of the ocean almost every day. So it was like using the ocean to allow that to be released from my being. And I would have loved it to be like an overnight thing, but the more that I intentionally, willfully let it go and actually looked at it and said, I'm ready, like I don't want to carry this anymore, this isn't who I am, the less grip it had on me. So I would say that's where a lot of the letting go ceremonies that I started to engage in, and the new moon ceremonies, like way back, like 10 years ago, this is kind of how I found myself onto maybe my own spiritual journey, was by noticing that if I sat with certain times of the month, whether it was the dark moon or the new moon, and just sat there with myself and a candle and spoke out loud to life and said, I'm ready to let this go, that I felt there was greater power. The part in me that wasn't that could see it. I could watch it. I could observe it. I could become more aware. And there was a moment I remember when I looked at myself in the mirror, and I realised that I had been looking around my eyes for years, and I hadn't actually looked at myself in the mirror and seen me. And I think it was a process of doing so much of this, intentionally saying, I give this up, like I give this to you. I don't, cutting the cords with this energy. And there was a moment where I looked at myself in the mirror and I saw me, and I saw my eyes, and I just welled up. It was so beautiful, because I was like, there you are. Like, I haven't seen you for so long, and there you are. And just that moment, that was such a huge moment for me. I've still got such a strong visual of me in the bathroom, and just seeing me and going, oh gosh, like, how could that have ever been true? How could that have ever been true? And I feel like we heal, from my experience, in spirals. So I can come back round to that belief, like maybe even before the podcast. Am I good enough to be on the podcast? And having that moment of like, here it is. And maybe it's not completely gone away. Maybe it's just changed. Maybe it's just much less than it used to be. And through saying yes to the things that allow me to grow, that prove to myself that I am enough, I'm constantly strengthening or feeding that wolf. You've heard of that Native American story, which wolf are you going to feed? And so it's like I'm going to feed the wolf with the actions that I am choosing that constantly are reaffirming to myself that I am enough. And it's now become really natural. I often, it used to be day to day with me, and now I don't think about it anymore. Yeah. So real shift, but it takes time. Yeah.
Yeah, beautifully said. Powerful. I can relate hugely to that. And it's the power of the stories we tell ourselves. You know, like that's a belief you created. Also empowers you, because you might have realized at that point that you have told yourself this story for so long. Like the power you've had to do that to you is equal to the power you've had to rewrite that for yourself. Like taking on full responsibility to how you are showing up for yourself and what you can then do with that, rather than pointing to something external and waiting for that to change for you to feel enough.
Right.
It's just so powerful when you take responsibility,
and then what happens when we validate ourselves and that feeling from within, rather than, because I'm not enough, I want you to tell me that I'm enough.
Well, that's the subconscious, right? We start seeking it from other people. Then the ego gets in the way, and it tries to prove itself right, which I find this has come up. So my ego would be somewhat satisfied when, say, if I'm not good at something, I feel that, and then it's proven to be right, or I'm like waiting for that to be proven right. And it might be that I'm not enough, and then someone might behave in a way that makes me feel like, oh, told you, you're not worthy of that, you're not worthy of love, you're not worthy of being enough. And it's kind of like the ego's always looking for that to prove itself right. It's so interesting. Bruce Lipton talks about that a lot. But yeah, it reminds me of lots of Joe Dispenza stuff about how to really like go in and wake up in the morning and just those affirmations that are powerful, and then can relieve you from your own prison that you've created for yourself. But then also just shifting and changing and bringing awareness and like the power of that. But you have to believe it. Affirmations do not work, or this stuff doesn't work, if you really deep down are not believing what you're saying. So then that requires the work to really go in and just understand, like, how are you meeting this side of yourself, and do you believe it's going to work? You know. But yeah, powerful. I think a lot of people can relate to that for sure.
I think the power of seeing and imagination really comes into this. Like, can we paint pictures in our minds, not just that we see, but that we feel, that we pack with a lot of emotion, that we can step into? I feel that throughout my life there's been these visions of myself, these images of myself, these imaginings of, you could call it what, your higher self, your future self. I didn't even really know about this when I first started doing it. I was just seeing a version of myself somewhere along the line, and all my energy was streaming towards that. And I knew that those were the steps that I was taking to get there, and I didn't know how I was going to get there. But the power of those images, it's incredible. Our imaginations are incredible. We have such a gift as human beings with our imaginations. We don't even yet know the full potential of them. And so I've found that that's been a real ally for me, is painting these pictures in my mind's eye and staying true to them. And Joe Dispenza, interesting, he's come up, he invites that, doesn't he, in his meditations, like every day. What do? You keep seeing and strengthening those pictures that you can step into. So
yeah, for sure. Even a future that you know is possible, there's something in acting as if it's now. So like being in a future, like calling in a reality that you want, say it's global, say it's like in your community or in your work, whatever it might be, calling in how you want the future to be. And then once you start being that, you're really bringing it into the reality that you're experiencing now. How do you want to move, play? What does it look like to be in a space full of people that are connected, are just really unconditionally loving each other, and then being that. And then when you imagine it and bring it into your reality, you're then creating it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's really the only way to create change, is to really be that. So yeah, can use your imagination to bring it in, but then you find out you end up becoming it. You know, it's interesting. So this was 10 years ago, you mentioned.
A long time ago, like maybe even longer.
Before you stepped into holding space and storytelling.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I was in this conversation with myself for a long time before. And it was through doing it that then I was with people and I said, would you like to try this thing with me? Or I would just be in conversation, say I'd be at the beach with a friend and I would say this invocation out loud and they would say, can you teach me that? Or can I repeat it after you? So it happened really naturally, just literally by being with people or by placing my hand upon a tree or and speaking.
What was the thing you were speaking?
Well, I so absolutely blessed to have just walked into an Aboriginal corroboree and ended up spending over a year and a half.
What's a corroboree?
Corroboree is a dance. It's like a dance festival. It's a meeting for Aboriginal mobs that they get together and they will do their dance and tell their stories and sing their songs and cook food under the earth. And so it's a meeting place for celebration and dances and lifting up the dreaming, their culture. And I happened to arrive in my early 20s, left the city and what I knew of white Australia and found myself at this corroboree, and it turned into like a women's culture, not like it was a women's culture and law camp. And it ended up being for 2 weeks that I sat with these women, both white aunties and Aboriginal aunties, and there was white young women that we were welcomed into that space. And that time was such a huge doorway for me into understanding the earth and the power of the land as very much alive. And I had absolutely no idea about this before, having grown up in the city of Sydney. And
what was that experience like, understanding that or hearing that the earth, the land was alive?
How do you actually put into words the incredible miracle that the earth is a sentient and alive being that is aware of us, that is moving through us, that is us. And so what was happening, because I was so out of touch with that, and the Australian bush, for anyone that's been there, you would know it's so harsh, it's sharp, it hurts you. So if you're not conscious, and at that point I was really unaware, I was at this corroboree and I was hurting myself, or the land was literally hurting me. It was telling me to wake up, and it was, sticks. I was stepping, because there's so many bindies, these sharp things on the floor in Australia. Everywhere I was walking, just like full of these bindies. I was hitting my head, leaves and branches were slapping me in the face. It was it was magpie swooping season, and the magpies get really territorial and they will come down and actually... No, they like peck your head.
Okay,
they actually come to like swoop at you and hurt you, and, like get away from my nest. So I was listening.
You're getting ambushed by Mother Earth.
I couldn't not listen, and yeah, I'm wary of how much to share as well, because a senior law woman, she said that what happens in women's law camps is for women, and it can make men sick if you share. What happens?
You told me this before.
Maybe.
I've heard this.
Maybe.
I've heard this before, maybe from you. Around this.
What I will share,
it's a
because
powerful idea.
Yeah, there was men that were cycling in and bringing us food from the land. They were bringing us turtles that they'd caught from the river. They were bringing us honey that they'd caught or they'd found from trees, and it was like I was beginning to understand more about the dreaming and the dream time, where you would dream things in, or ideas or imaginings would come into your awareness, your imagination, and then those things would appear. So either you'd dream the turtle, or the turtle would dream you, and then the turtle would appear. These things where you are so connected with the earth, and through the ceremonies that we were doing and the songs that we were singing and the way that we were being painted up and the craft that we were making, there was one of the Aboriginal aunties, her name was Jinky, a lot of respect for her, she's from Broome, and she said, we're bringing you young white women into our ways, we're teaching you part of our culture, because we want you to understand our connection, and we realise that you are going to be walking into positions of power in your lives, and we want you to carry this knowledge with you. So it was a real privilege to be in that cluster of women and to feel that, the weight of that, and that never left me. So they taught us about how to engage with the land. They were saying you wouldn't just walk into somebody's house and open the door and go to the kitchen and pull out a cup of tea, and this stranger is looking at you just like, who are you? What are you doing in my home? What would you do? You'd knock on the door and you'd introduce yourself and you'd explain why you're there and what can you have, etc. So there were all different ways, but in simplicity, it was putting your hand on the earth and saying, hi, my name is Samantha. This is how old I am. This is the land that I came from, that I grew up from, that grew me up, the storylines of my childhood. And this is my intention for being here. I'm here to dance. I'm here to be with the women. I'm passing through here. I'm telling stories here. I'm camping here for the night. And it stayed with me so strongly, that teaching. I ended up going down to meet them at the Aboriginal Tent Embassy in Canberra, and then out at Uluru in the desert for another culture and law ceremony with the women. So I travelled with them for a bit. That just went so deep in, you know, like even here, even in England, I've been here for 4 years, and honestly, everywhere I go, I stop and I will speak to any nature being, and I'll arrive at festivals and place my hands on the ground first thing when I get there. Hi, my name is Samantha. This is how old I am. This is my intention for being here. Thank you so much for having me. That's it. 30 seconds, but showing that respect, introducing ourselves. I don't fully know what that is doing, but it feels right. And there's a part in me that exhales. I go, I can be here. And there's a part of that reciprocity that happens where some kind of energy, whatever you want to call it, the spirit in the land, the spirits that live there, the more than human others, the trees, the rocks, there is this thank you. Great. We know you. You know, so that's how I started then being in my day-to-day life. My family had no idea what to do with that. I was keeping a lot of it to myself, not doing it so openly. I was aware of like who I was around. Definitely, like absolutely, discernment was a huge lesson in my 20s. Apart from the fact I was barefoot everywhere. My dad was like, can you please put shoes on? But
can you speak to that a little bit around, the polarity would be unapologetic everywhere you go and just standing for your truth, standing for what you feel is right, etc. Not just hiding for anyone, but then what's important is knowing your audience, knowing what's going to wield better results, for example.
Gosh, it's such a big question.
It's the wisdom, right?
Yeah,
it's the wisdom
absolutely.
that how much to show at certain times.
Yeah. I think the person that has spoken to this that really touched me was my meditation teacher. His name's Tom Knowles. He teaches Vedic meditation. And he said, like, does the person that you're with show a receptivity or a willingness to know? Are they curious? Is there a curiosity in them? If there is, maybe there's an opening to share something. Not everything, just what feels right. But if we're going around speaking our truth, I was having this conversation with my partner, speaking our truth constantly, and people aren't ready to hear it.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting, but where is it landing? And then what are we being met with? And it's not so much about that, but
is it working?
You know, is there? What's the point in that? And so I've really taken that on board. Like, is the person that I'm with right now, is there a willingness and a receptivity to learn, or are they asking? Like, is there a direct question? Can you teach me about that? Can you tell me about that? You know, what are you doing there? Like, how did you do that? And then it's like, okay, there's an invitation.
Yeah.
So I think that those kinds of invitations for me have been the way to share, not before. And I admit, like, I've overshared in the early days, and I wanted everyone to know the magic of life and how wonderful and beautiful it was, you know, and realised very quickly that I was being met by, you know, judgment and closed hearts and tons of projection, and went, whoa, I've got to reel this in. This is not as safe to share as I would like. And touches on, I mean, I like calling it a magical path, you know, when you realise that life's alive and everything's aware of you, and, you know, what do you do with that? Like, is it a conversation that you keep to yourself? Do you speak to life? Are you aware of the synchronicities? And when do you start to bridge that out into the world? And this has been a huge journey, you know, how much to share on social media, how much of how much do you share about your life, about your magical craft, about who you are, about how you see the world. The witches weren't burned that long ago, you know, like I think that imprint of is this safe is still here.
Yes.
And
That's so big that you bring safety into it.
Oh my gosh, is it safe to do what we're doing? Like, it's a real question that I hold with every post, with every story I put online, with every, like, is this okay? Do I feel okay sharing this? And where's the balance, right? I don't even know if I have the answer to this. Where's the balance between making this available to more people who are opening up and reeling it in and holding that preciousness and the mystery in our hearts for ourselves to let it cook? Like, we don't reveal everything. There's power in mystery. I think that's really important.
Big lesson there. There's power in mystery. I feel I'm going through that in what to share, because I feel like I want to be that open book that I invite for other people. So there's nothing I'm hiding behind, and that's that's one of my values. It's the integrity I've got. I can be completely open and hide nothing, but there is something that's lost. There's a consequence of that. There's a mystery that is actually more powerful to, perhaps, I heard this quote the other day, it's to preach everywhere you go, speak sometimes. So preach everywhere you go, and when words are needed, then speak, or something. It's like, well, beautiful, because we're always preaching what we're learning, and it's like an embodiment of the things that we want to hold close to us, value, like want to bring into the world. People like you that I gravitate towards so much. I gotta listen to you all day, honestly. I love it. I'm so grateful for this conversation. But the people that I want to surround myself with and I'm inspired by hold things close to them, and they preach with their life, their bodies, their whatever they're wearing, whatever they're close to, whatever they want to choose to do. And words are a very small part of it, but it is a big part of it. Sorry.
I know that's why I'm laughing, because it's true though. How funny is a storyteller, right? Where words are like this beautiful craft. The old abracadabra. As I speak, I create. In the beginning was the word. Like, what is this? The power of our words. It's extraordinary. It's spelling. What are we spelling? What are we painting into creation? What are we calling forth into creation? Before I was a storyteller, I was doing just side note, we're all storytellers, so that's ridiculous that we think we're not, right? Human beings were constantly telling stories. I just told a story about my life in Australia and the Aboriginal. I would think maybe I'm not a storyteller, but yes, we're constantly telling stories. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That how can we? This is the power of poetry and story. We're trying to find ways to express the inexpressible. How do we put words to something that's so beyond words? I don't even know that this is. Look, I'm lost for words.
There's a word.
It's so funny.
The word for that
so funny.
Is what's the word when you? There's no words for it. It's ineffable.
Ineffable. Thank you. It was just floating around here with us. You got it.
Ineffable. It's ineffable.
Ineffable.
So that's it. But this is the magic. This is what we can do in this conversation, is really try and bring in how it's the alchemy of experience, but then communicating that. This is how we evolved. We evolved way, I guess, greater than any other species through our communication tools, through bonding and sharing in social circles and being able to communicate with each other. That set us apart from any other species. We were able to do that. We weren't the strongest, the fastest. We were persistent, but we also had social dynamics that really helped us hunt and prevail and move forward. And the mind. Yes, this is true. Our ability to tell stories. Yes.
Our ability to see something and then create it.
Sure.
To imagine something and then build it. To envision something and then step toward it. Wow. I don't know if there's any other creature, and maybe if anyone's listening, you can tell me, that can do that. I don't know.
Maybe under the ocean.
Maybe under the ocean, maybe the dreams that they have, but like to actually build what we can do. It's so precious.
What the mind can conceive, we can achieve.
I just feel to drop this little quote in. Bill Plotkin, who, have you heard of Bill Plotkin?
Yeah, exactly.
Animus Valley Institute, works with visionquests, works with like the mythopoetic lens and way of seeing the world as animate and alive and speaking to us. His partner, Janine Marie Horgan, is a doctor, and she has a doctorate in planetary imagination and the dreaming of the earth, like the earth's imagination, which is so beautiful. And she referenced somebody, I don't know the name of him, who said it's not the war on the physical that we need to be worried about, it's the war on the imaginal. It's the war on the imaginal. What are the pictures that we are being shown on the news, through video games, through Netflix, that we're becoming desensitized to and normalized, that then we are stepping in to create from the pictures that we're seeing, from the feelings that we're seeing. So, as creative beings, as poets, as storytellers, as dancers, as DJs, as musicians, as a human being, we are inherently creative. What a responsibility to consider, like, what are the images that we are painting for people? What are the worlds that we're painting in people's imaginations to offer whatever you want: hope, love, new possibilities, different ideas for different futures, other realities that could be possible. What do we want to step into? I love this. I love this idea of how powerful our imaginations are. And this is something that I say to the storytellers, the people that I hold workshops for, is like, we have this responsibility, and it's beautiful and it's important, and all of our imaginations and our voices are unique. And what comes through me is going to be completely unique, and what comes through you is going to be completely unique. A lot of people don't realize the power of their voices, the power of this unique current of energy, of electricity, a signature, a transmission, like whatever you want to call it. And the more that I hear that, when it's true and it's authentic, which is what I really encourage and love and support people to do, it has such power to change and transform. We need more of this. Can you imagine if people were out there in the world speaking the unique soul signature alive in them, transcribed within them, that wants to be shared? Michael Meade is such a huge advocate for this. Do you like Michael Meade?
No, not really.
Oh, he's like the grandfather of mythology in the world right now. He's such a cool dude. For anyone that's listening, check out his podcast, The Living Myth.
Okay, great.
Really amazing.
Finish this one and then go.
Yeah, definitely finish. Stay with us. He says something like, everyone has a prayer inside of them. Everyone has a song inside of them. Everyone has a dance. Everyone has a story inside of them. And he speaks about there's some written text transcribed within our soul that wants to come out in some fashion. And so, as we speak, we create. So what are we going to do? How are we going to help that part of us find a way out into the world? It's like a real longing we've come in with. It's real. How do we do that? How do we express that? Oh, so good.
So good. So he started off by invoking us to feel into how magical our words are and how much we can bring in and manifest our own reality with our words, with our spells. And then it's like, what are we going to do for that? That questions are way more powerful than answers. And just to feel into how are you going to create this reality? There's such an empowerment within that. The responsibility you've got to speak into every moment. How has that changed for you over time? Bringing your awareness to the storyteller. It's funny, the emotion that come up around, like, I am a storyteller.
Right.
Like, how ridiculous does that feel? That you
so silly.
That's a statement, but you're very aware that everyone is. And it's almost like you're the reminder that everyone's a storyteller. Like, I am a reminder that you're a storyteller. It's like you're just a mirror. You're a mirror of a storyteller to let other people know that they are too.
That's an interesting way of seeing it.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So can we break those things down? Because I feel like it's important to get your take on, like, soul and what that kind of animate way of thinking, but also that soul speak. Like what is that's coming through in your best words to try and break down, or like what that soul is trying to invoke in this physical.
It's beautiful the way you frame that question, by the way, because I think a lot of people, including myself in the past, have gotten really hung up on like, it's my voice, it's my words, it's my... But what if it was something moving through us with a perspective shift?
Well, that's what people say when they're on stages. They lose... You hear this all the time. People that are on stage and they don't feel it's them. They're just there, and they just have to make way for what's coming through. And they often look up, and and it's like, well, I don't know. No one really knows. There's so much mystery. Okay. But like that's a common thing. Yeah, people feel channeling.
Elizabeth Gilbert, in her TED talk, she spoke to this brilliantly about in the past, in ancient Greece, it was commonly known that there were daemons, geniuses. There's lots of words, muses. You know, what do we call this kind of fountain of inspiration that communicates with us? We can personify it. So the 9 muses in ancient Greece. These geniuses that would work with us. And if someone got up on stage and did an absolutely brilliant performance, people would applaud them, but the next day they were seen as a normal human because that was the genius at work. And if they did an absolutely terrible performance, well, everything would go back to normal because, you know, that was the genius. So it took the pressure off the ego, this idea of it was me and mine and I. What does that mean? And how can we imagine that for ourselves that feels useful and helpful? And that's what I've been with for quite a few years now, inquiring into my own process of writing and receiving stories. I realised that I wasn't often sitting and writing stories. I was imagining or dreaming with stories, and images or storylines or characters would just pop up in my awareness. And I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this? So I realised, what is it that is sending these images, these feelings, these messages, these visions to me? And I termed it or named it, my own way of relating to it was the creative wellspring. And I came to understand that there is this ever-flowing, infinite wellspring of divine inspiration, whatever you feel you want to call it, that is constantly flowing, always overflowing. We can at any time go to drink from this wellspring and receive inspiration, and there's many ways that we can do that. However, if we have, I've written a whole story about the wellspring and what gets in the way, and for the use of the blocks or the obstacles, I've called them the rock people, the frozen people outside the cave of the wellspring that are stopping the waters from flowing. And who are these rock people? The beliefs in us that I'm not good enough, that I'm not a storyteller, I'm not an artist, I can't create, I'm not creative, I don't have a creative bone in my body. You know, whatever the things were that we were told that freeze, you know, into shape, that stop a beautiful river of ideas and imagery flowing, and it becomes a trickle, and then we think that we're not good enough and we can't do it and we're not creative. It's like, what's in the way of the thing from flowing? Again, like, it's not that I had to learn that I'm good enough, it's I just had to take the thing away that was telling me I wasn't, and then suddenly this thing just naturally flows, because as human beings we're creative. That's just so natural.
I'm on the back of one of my t-shirts. One of my favourite quotes I have to share. It's, don't go looking for love, remove everything that's blocking it.
Yes.
It's such a powerful idea.
Feels like with our creativity it might be at the forefront, you know, to actually allow our creativity to unleash or be expressed or find flow or freedom. What are the things in the way, and how do we see them and get help to shift them?
So these rock people. So
it's a good image, isn't it?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So how do they come into the story, and what would you say is their mission in a way? Because if everything is animate, then I don't know. It's like the polarities that we exist in, right? The polarities of of you as a channel, but then you feeling like you can do anything, you're fully creative, but then all the blocks that come in the way of that, like what are they? What are they here to do?
Keep us safe.
Sure. Lean into the...
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't go over there.
They have it.
There's
everything has a...
I think it's really important we don't demonize them.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, this like evil, wrong, bad.
Good, bad language.
Like their time is, you know, when we get to a point where we can hold ourselves and we're ready to see them, that the different aspects of ourselves can step to the fore and say, I've got this now. Thank you to this part, this rock person, for keeping me safe. Thank you for playing your role. Bill Plotkin calls it the loyal soldier. Yeah. The war's finished, but that loyal soldier is still armed, ready for battle. Don't do that. Don't go there. We're not little anymore, you know. Maybe it's from a past life, depending on what you believe in. How do we let these aspects of ourselves know that it's safe, that they can relax, that I've got you now, that I'm here, that I'm solid, that I'm looking after it, that I'm driving the car, I'm steering the ship, I've got this, and you can relax. So there might be, and this is through my own journey, almost like soul retrievals, mini soul retrievals, where the parts of us that have had to do this kind of work to keep us safe, to help us survive, can fold back in, can be held and dissolve into our own care and love for ourselves. So I think it's really important for these aspects of ourselves that we see them. They can be really strong, they can be really violent, they can be really mean. The inner critic can be so mean. Some of these voices, right? So we almost need to find the strength within us, the healing, you know, whatever, when we're ready, we have enough resources to be able to meet it, to see it, to name it, to externalize it, to draw it, to write it. What are the things that it's saying to you? And how do we become more aware of that dialogue and strengthen the aspects of ourself that can say, I hear you, but actually I'm okay, or actually this is what I'm choosing, or actually I'm going to show up anyway. And until we find the strength, like the hero's journey, right, to actually rise above and face that fear, step into the cave that we're scared to enter, slay the dragon, step over the cavern, unless we meet that and rise above, we'll constantly be met and fall prey to that voice. There's got to be enough of us, strong enough within us, supported enough within us to really meet those voices and say, thank you, but I've got this now.
Yes. Absolutely.
And in that, bring in the imagery of the cave that we're scared to enter. We find the treasure that we seek. There's the medicine. When it transforms, it's so beautiful. There's the treasure. There's the riches. And then almost, I think, because I've been on such a big journey with self-worth, lack of self-worth, self-doubt, I'm not good enough, this is now what I feel I can support others with because of that transformation. So it's like our pain and our wounding really does aid us in our ability to help other people do that too. So it's like, what are your frozen people saying to you, and how can that actually be used as your superpower too?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
often our superpowers are also our kryptonite, but they can be our kryptonite first, the things that really hold us back, but then how to go in, which sounds like you did for a long time.
Still doing.
Yeah, still going back there for treasure, right?
And just for healing, actually. Just for healing. Just to help.
But the treasure is that your healing process will then be help. Well, you're trying to deny it.
I'm laughing at the treasure. Go in for the treasure.
But it's treasure for other people. It's treasure for other people.
Absolutely.
It might not feel that for you at the time, but it's your journey and the things that you bring back from that experience, the way you were able to alchemize something, or the way you were able to move through it, then invites that into other people. Gives them the permission to know it's possible. Totally.
It's so worthwhile.
Enter projections here, because the demons that we're talking about, and also inviting in a holding of that and not a rejection, because when we reject hero's journey into the shadows, when we bad emotion, bad anger, bad masculinity, bad this, bad that, goes into the shadow, and then we project that in front of other people. I often think about people quite close to me that are demonstrating the same behaviors behind closed doors that they're projecting onto other people that isn't okay. So for example, clumsiness, messiness. That's not okay for other people to do that, but behind closed doors, you see they're exactly that. It's really interesting to observe.
Wow.
And no right or wrong, good or bad. It's just this is how humans, this is how human psyche it has evolved, or what happens when you do force things, and you don't accept things about yourself. You think that you label them bad, and you think that's not good, and then you end up rejecting that from other people even greater. That makes sense.
Totally.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about...
Can I also add, because it might... just that I really... It just feels important to mention that like I have received a lot of support in that process over my life, and have sought out spaces where I've felt really held and safe to be able to do that. Yes, I've done a lot of it on my own, but I've really intentionally been in spaces with mentors and elders, and teachers and guides, where I have been held enough to be able to do that, and I just speak so much for that. Do you know what I mean? We need that. So I just feel like that there's a responsibility piece in that too, for anyone that's wanting to do this kind of work, that you find people that feel safe to you to be able to lean into.
How important has it been in your journey then, just to speak to this, how important has it been in your journey to be around people that see you? I feel that's
question.
It's so pivotal in young people's lives. It's been in my life to have someone that I respect that sees me. This is like, I see you, maybe not with words, but they give you a platform. They give you time, space, whatever it might be, but you feel seen. I feel that is what's going on.
I just think it's absolutely beautiful what you're speaking to, and I couldn't agree more how important that is. And something about being seen, but also being safe to be you.
To make mistakes.
I think I had become contorted into such a shape from my upbringing. I was so far removed from who I truly was, that being with these kinds of teachers and elders and leaders and mentors and just aunties, you know what I mean? Like just literally older people that are like, come here and just sit and just let's make something together. I'll make you a cup of tea. Like that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's like those contorted, distorted aspects of myself that had to play these games or run these programs could soften and realise that I didn't have to do that anymore. So it's like a melting and a softening into our natural shape. When people allow us to be who we are simply by seeing us, like you're saying, how does that then allow us to come home to who we truly are? And it's not the easiest of journeys in a culture where so many people want to hold you in a certain shape that is really not who you are or not good for you. And so there's no coincidence that I've moved to the other side of the world to find more spaces and places where I feel exactly what you're talking about. I can be safe to really breathe out into my true shape, my sense of self, my embodied soulful self that can really express freely. So it's a big journey, and it's meant a lot of letting go. And so I just want to speak to anybody that's on that journey that feels like the environment that they're in isn't supporting them, or they feel that there's just a lack of holding or support, that you find those spaces, however small, that you can lean into, whether it be a coffee shop or a friend on the phone, or you know, a teacher that you find online, or a book that you can relate to, or a journal that you can write in. You know, there's so many ways we can find that safety and reflection. Just don't give up, like keep going, because life will continue to reflect back the parts of you that you keep stretching out into and focusing on and breathing into. And suddenly then you're swimming in a sea of people that just see you and celebrate you and love you, the more that you can do that for yourself. But it starts small. So
start small, and there's no quick fixes or shortcuts.
Well done, well said.
It's powerful to go back to belief. You have to believe it's possible, because if you don't, you're then inviting in the not possible in every moment. You're bringing that belief, like your belief shaping your reality. if you don't believe it's possible, then you're going to reinforce it everywhere you go. And that's often what happens.
So it's almost like there's I think 2 key words here. Worthiness, like I am worthy. I am worthy I am worthy to be seen.
It's a big one.
I'm worthy to be safe.
Yeah.
I'm worthy to be creative. And also permission. We have to give ourselves permission, because maybe that permission was taken away from us. So how do we give ourselves the permission? I give myself permission to look after myself. I give myself permission to make myself feel safe. I give myself permission to eat well. I give myself permission to dance. You know, like, there's something in that. Why are we holding ourselves back? There's a permission piece. Yeah. So what is it? What do you need to give yourself permission to do, or to feel, or to be, or to create?
Yeah. Yeah, and know that you deserve it. So that's like back to the worthiness. It's like you have to feel, because nothing's going to work unless you feel like you are deserving of everything that's going to come. Or it will come and it'll pass you by. You're not going to see it. You're not going to really feel it, because you don't think it's what you deserve, because of, again, back to the story that you're telling yourself. I think a big one that's navigated my whole journey of a decade is what it means to be human, and the story we tell ourselves around what it is to be human. You know, does it mean that we're creative? Are we not creative? Like, what stories have we bought into of like what it means to be human? And I've arrived at understanding that we have the capacity for so much. So really it depends on environment.
Oh my gosh. Totally.
Your environment really shapes and molds you big time. Pressure, like if you look at water, what natural state is water. It depends on so much. Temperature, pressure, like it can be many different things, and so can we. And that, how has environment shaped you? I think over the years. And you just mentioned about moving out of an environment that perhaps didn't serve you. Maybe it's the people or the buildings or the infrastructure. The kind of framework of where you live. Infrastructure is an interesting one, because if we look at where we live, it's like, what infrastructure have we got to support our health? What does support us in all the ways that we need it? But moving to the UK, what was that journey like for you in coming here? Were you alone? Did you feel alone? Like, I would love to go back there to revisit of how the landing here was for you.
It's just thank you for asking, because it's just taking me to remember very powerful change. And you speak to environment, and thank you. I was literally having this chat with someone this morning about the power of our environment. So I had just come out of the first vision quest that I had ever sat in Australia. I think it was 2018. And what came super clear, because I took in some very powerful questions around service and what my gifts and talents were that I was here to bring in this life. And the response was story and ceremony. And I was like, yes, it was just absolutely so clear from my journey that these were the things that I adored, that adored me, that I was willing to continue to be in devotion and commitment to. And I'd walked with story in Australia, finding any kind of fire and stage to perform on, just to play with. I'd memorised all these children's books in Australia just to start, because I didn't even know where to start. There wasn't a storytelling subculture over there like there is here. There weren't storytelling teachers or mentors. There was just this a moment in Oz with a very supportive group of people on New Year's Eve, and they said, go on, do something, like share something, a workshop with us. So there was about 40 of us, and I went off into the Australian bush and just walked around the landscape where we were by this incredible lake and started to hear or see a story. It was just like, there apparently the year before, some of the people that had gone to this site had seen this little blue fairy. And it was this like legend of the blue fairy. And it was just, the whole land was just singing of this fairy's journey. And I walked through the land and just managed to like, didn't even manage, it was just like, and then this happened, and then this happened. And then it was like I was being told, get the group to stop here and do this with the character in the story. And get them to, you know, little rituals along the way. We ended up at this great tree on the eve of New Year's, just like tying our intentions onto this tree and having gone on this interactive, immersive storytelling adventure, which I didn't even know that's what it was. I'd never done anything like it. And people came up after and, was that drama therapy? Was that, like, what was that? That was
theatre.
What was that? And I was like, I don't know. But it really, out of everything in my life that I'd experienced, it was the most true, enlivening, inspiring thing I'd ever experienced. And I honestly, in that moment, stood on the ground. I remember it. I was just like, this is what I've got to follow. I don't care what else, but this is it, you know. And I did, until that point at the Vision Quest, where, you know, I was involving myself in stories wherever I could. And then Martin Shaw came up, teacher, mythologist who lives in Dartmoor, Devon. And I came out with Martin Shaw in my head and his course, Story, Ceremony, and Martin Shaw. Turns out the friend, who wasn't a friend, but just turned into a friend, was vision questing on the site far from me, about 100 metres away from me, also came out talking about Martin Shaw. And he was like, I've got to go study with Martin Shaw. And I was like, I think I do too. We'd never met. And turns out we both got in to Martin Shaw's year-long training the next year. I was 20th on the waiting list. 20 people dropped out and I managed to get a place the month before, and I had a month to decide, was I going to move to the UK for 6 months. And got on the plane, and when I landed when I was on the plane, in my head I'd been to London once, and I was like, why am I going to this country? Like, out of all the places in the world that I could be going, why here? I just heard from a friend who said, I think you'll like this town in Devon. It reminds me a lot of a town that you lived in back home in Australia, in the Byron Bay Shire. And I didn't look it up. I didn't see any images of it. I was like, okay, I'm getting off at London, getting a train straight to this town, and arrived 30 hours later or something ridiculous, because, you know, from the other side of the world, totally jet lagged, listening to all the English accents, standing at the train station, looking around, just like, okay, I'm here. In 6 hours, I kid you not, 6 hours of being from that train station, dropping my bag off to someone that was going to have me stay the night, I ended up meeting future friends. I just walked into a restaurant. Oh, you're here. Would you like to have dinner with us? The guy who I was studying with was like, oh, we were all just going to have dinner with our new friends from England. Do you want to stay? Sure. Turns out that one of them had a spare room, went back to their room that night, to their house. They ended up being my housemates for a year. Some of my closest friends since I've lived in the UK, all within. So at midnight that night, I'd found my future home that I was going to be based in. Little did I know, COVID was on the horizon, lockdown was on the horizon. And when that came to pass, the Aussies who were local, who were with me, went home. But my body and my being was like, no, you've got to stay. And it was so clear. There was no part of me that was getting on the plane to get back. And it was almost as if when I landed in the UK, there was like a tap in my imagination that got turned on. And I was dreaming with stories, and I was journaling with stories, and like walking with the so that moment of being in the Australian bush and the stories coming, it happened over there, but it was like it was amplified in Devon. And there was this moment like a couple of months into my trip where I like closed this spare bedroom and I had butcher's paper all over the walls, and I had like 4 stories speaking to me. And it was amazing. I was like this wonderful, mad, creative woman, just like writing characters, ideas, themes, storylines. Had no idea what they were, but I was trying to thread them together. I was like, what are you saying to me, you know? So my process with receiving and imagining and dreaming and creating and crafting stories, I wouldn't even say I create them, really deepened in my time over here. The permission to do this kind of work fully stretched out, because people didn't know me before I came here. They couldn't hold an idea to me. I was allowed to be myself here, and so the magical abilities that I'd called forth in the Vision Quest could really more fully express when I landed. So that's from that moment on, like from moving to the UK, I'd say there's been hundreds, maybe 300 plus stories that just I've been in conversation with, communion with, told around fires, and they come and then they go. You know, a lot of these stories, like I've told once and then never again. They're for that moment around that fire with that group, like you saw at Medicine Festival. You know, just like drop the story into the fire, and then that's the prayer for that moment for those people. And then the next event there'll be another story, like the deep listening, like as bards, like what did we do? We were receiving stories from the earth. We were singing up these tales from the land. Yes, stories, folk stories passed down. Total respect to these old stories, myths, folk stories that have been passed down from mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth to mouth over. Such power in that. And why is there so much information at this time that wants to be spoken and shared? Why is my heart and my mind and my imagination flooded with imagery and feeling and characters that want to be spoken into existence and then just travel on their way? Like, what is that about?
Do you think it's unique to this time?
No. However, maybe it's needed at this time. And maybe we're remembering, and maybe there's more energy available at this time to support this kind of work. So maybe like a visionary artist, they're doing it through the paintbrush, or through a singer, they're doing it through the lyrics of the song. And my creative heart and mind works with story. It's like, ooh, play with this image. Ooh, see this vision. Ooh, like there was a man at Love Jam in Medicine who was weaving this tapestry. Did you see him? Oh my gosh. For anyone that saw him, just incredible. Had a near-death experience, had super strong visions, decided for the first time in his life to weave a tapestry. Was weaving these visions he was seeing live at these festivals for hours in deep meditation with string. Oh my gosh. And this whole, you could call it a story, but it was a vision, it was a tapestry, it was a web. And I was like, I felt such a resonance, because I was like, I can feel, tell, that's what's happening with me with the stories. You know, I'm being shown things. This is why I hesitate to say I'm a writer or an author. You know, it's like I receive. I'm a strong, receptive conduit, you could say.
I feel like you're turning on a different side of your brain that we're not used to. This is coming to me now. Like there's something around the hemispheres of the brain, and we live in one of them a lot. And when you open up in this way, and the conversation that's happening, that everything's speaking to us, that whether it's through forest fires or through climate change, whatever it might be, there's something, we get feedback. Energy is being changed and translated through it all, and we do get feedback between how we treat the soil, for how we treat the trees, like whatever it might be, and all this information maybe is heightened at this time.
Maybe, I think so.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I do want to bring in around the fire at Medicine. So there's something that happened. I'm not sure if it was you or someone that followed you, but they talked about what happened around the storytelling circle. There was like a dragon in the fire. Is that?
It was a firebird.
What went on?
Oh my gosh, that moment was so incredible. Can't even tell you.
I think,
it's absolutely incredible.
Someone was telling me about how this was unfolding.
Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, I think Ben Christie told me about it. He was there, and I was like, was Sam there? And he was like, yeah, I think maybe. But yeah.
So the firekeeper came up to me before the story.
Was he the guy that was sat in the chair? That was playing an instrument?
No, that was the musician
that was
supporting me. Yeah.
Because he was...
I know,
pretty captivating as well.
Multi-instrumentalist. I'm actually taking this story for the first time ever on tour, because it had such an impact for me and everyone. It was like,
wow.
Whoa, this
is one that needs telling
to
again.
travel. Yeah, totally.
It's
called the Legend of the Firebird. And so the firekeeper came up to me and he just said, are there any animals in the story? Because I can, with the coals, paint them out of the fire. And I was like, oh, that's very cool. And this story features the 4 ancient Celtic gods that live in the direction, the hawk of dawn, the salmon of wisdom, the stag in the heat of the chase, and the great bear in the starry heavens. So they all come into this myth in some way. And I said, yeah, there's a firebird. At the end of the story, the firebird returns. Can you paint that? And he said, that's going to be perfect because we will have had enough coals by the end of the story. I didn't know that him and the other bikekeeper apparently the whole time was just like looking at me waiting. When this I'm talking is like the last 10 minutes of an hour story, right? So they're like on the edge of their toes, just like waiting for this moment. And then eventually I nod to them after the whole hero's journey. The protagonist has gone into the other world, the shadow world, to retrieve the healing waters and make her return. I don't want to say too much because it's just such an epic tale, and if you do come to one of these stories live, it'd be amazing. And so this egg that is sitting in this tree that has been prophesied to be a firebird that will return at some point is a legend that's been passed down from this tribe through like hundreds and hundreds of years, through their stories and their myths and their legends, and they honour this great ancestral tree. And as the water for the first time arrives back into the parched lands of the east, it surrounds the tree. The tree drinks up the water, and then the firebird cracks out of the egg. And that was the moment that they painted the firebird on the fire. So there I am explaining the resurrection of this firebird, the phoenix. And it's flapping its wings and it's coming to life and it's bringing balance to the world. It's bringing light to the day and day to the night. It's almost like creation story, how day and night came to be. Mm-hmm. And there before us in fire art out of coals is the firebird. Like live, we literally watched it be painted in out of coals in the fire. It was just, oh my gosh, I've never experienced anything like that. And I wonder, like, how do we bring fire art into stories more? Being around the fire is, for me, the best place to tell stories, without a doubt. But it's like, imagine that. Imagine if there was fire art at every story. That would be so cool. Amazing. So yes, the firebird returned very much for all of us in that moment. It was very cool.
Beautiful. I'm called to ask, what's been the biggest impact of you telling stories? Is there like a common thread that impacts people the most, that people return, and perhaps you were the seed that they needed to invoke it in them, or how they choose to describe or show up and speak to the things that are important to them within story, through story, because the collective consciousness, that's why the hero's journey shows up in all areas of the world. Like, it is a common collective experience that we all have, and it seems to be some sort of, like Carl Jung talked about it, it's like the collective archetype, or perhaps it's a similar theme that throughout the world it's like the arc of the hero's journey is the thing that we can all relate and interact with, and it seems to be some sort of collective understanding.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're talking to the kind of the monomyth that Joseph Campbell named. So I'm returning to your question, because stories travel through all of our life, and in our life we go through many cycles of the hero's journey. What Martin Shaw helped me to understand is that myth and story, they work almost like mythic or soulful psychic acupuncture. So the images or the feelings or the places in the story that stick with you. At the end of a story, you might be left with one or two images that are really alive in you. This is what I do as well at the end of the stories that I tell. I'll invite often just to sit with, what is the image that is alive in you? Find your way into the story. What is where are you in the story? Where are you in that story? And just let it speak to you, and then we feed the story. As, if you choose to see it, the stories are alive, and we feed the story with these images. We'll speak them out loud without our personal experience, not like, I relate to this because when the firebird broke out of the egg, when the water returned to the dry lands of the east, we speak these images aloud, and it feeds. It's like this cacophony of voices from all directions that just feed the story. And if we journey with those images, it speaks to us, it shows us parts. What do we need to see within ourselves that image might be mirroring, revealing to us what parts of ourselves might be in exile that it's pointing to. It's almost like it helps with retrieving parts, which is where Carl Jung and his process of individuation comes in, to return these parts to wholeness. So the stories are going to speak to everyone differently, and that's the beauty of them. So I've had people coming up telling me that the stories that they've heard that I've told have guided them to do all kinds of things, but it's not me. It's how is the story speaking to them, and what were they ready to receive and hear, and how was that going to impact them at that point in their life. And I just want to add to the end of this question that actually what, as a storyteller, makes me feel so connected to this is the look on people's faces, the grown adults, because I love telling stories to adults. I really like telling stories to kids, but there's a difference. I love telling stories to adults. Like, it's a real... Because you see these fully grown, serious human beings being very serious and part of society, honestly melting, and the faces of the inner children that come forward, and the crossed legs and the slouching and the hands and the face and the hands and the looking up. It's like suddenly I'm sitting with a whole circle of children who are adults, who are desperately hungry for a story, who have longed and yearned and craved and wished, and they didn't even know that that's what they wanted. But it touches such a deep part in us that wants to hear a story, that wants to be taken on a journey, that wants to go somewhere, magical, like take me there. Like, it's in us. That's what we love as humans. That's how we connect. So that for me is the soul medicine. It's speaking to the young ones in all of us and calling us back to our remembering, calling us back to our wholeness, calling us back to what's true, calling us back to our home in ourself. So precious.
So beautiful. I don't want us to end, but I think that is an amazing
we
place
can wrap it up
to end this conversation with mystery intact, not to exhaust ourselves and keep continuing to dive down these amazing mysterious rabbit holes, which I'm loving. The conversation will continue for sure throughout our lives. I'm so passionate about spreading your wisdom with other people, inviting people into your space, and just telling many people about what you're doing and how you're speaking to life and how you're living your life. I really see you, like I really do. It's amazing. You feel like a real sister. I see myself in you. You've got a similar face, I think. But it's something, if we did like a face swap, nothing would happen.
Should we do it?
I don't know, maybe. But yeah, back to the serious.
Back to being serious adults.
Serious about
serious
you.
Adults.
I'm serious about your work, and I wouldn't even call it work. It's just what you've chosen to, to take on board and continue to show up for. It's powerful, and you're so mindful of how you're treading, what you're treading, how you're stepping gently into the world that I see. And I'm curious to learn more about you, because I feel like this is like a snapshot of like, I need to be in a space that you're creating this magic and inviting so much on the story. It's beautiful that in a story there's a place for everyone. I love that from the beginning to the potential end. I don't know, but it's like throughout the story there's a space for everyone to kind of fit in their own mirroring of what's true for them. But yeah, thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy. Go, talk to me, go on. You're bursting to say more. What do you want to speak to right now? Is there any thing you want to also invite for people to potentially leave them with, or like plant any seeds, or what's been alive in you recently that you want to speak to?
Was really foster the voice that is encouraging you to create and express, and allow yourself, give yourself permission. That might be absolutely massive to do. Baby steps. We all can do this. This isn't something that I uniquely have access to. It's a muscle that builds over time, and it's a conversation that deepens and develops, and so we have to start somewhere. So find the place and find what excites you, find what inspires you, find what lights you up, because that is your pathway in. That is going to be completely unique for yourself. Nobody else is going to share that, and so you need to believe in it. It is precious. It is so precious. It is so worthy. The journey is so worthy. It's not easy, but it is so worthy. So like, you have all my support and all of my encouragement to follow what feels true, and find the small spaces in your life where you can make more space and more time for that. It's powerful. Yeah, that's the message that I'd like to leave.
What an invitation. Beautiful, Sam. Thank you so much.
Be okay to share a little.
Absolutely.
About.
I was gonna ask us to leave us with a little something.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like we're like trees, and over the last few years, the tree of my expression has been bearing more fruit, and there's just like a beautiful amount of fruit that is hanging off the trees that I can share at the moment.
Yeah.
So I just love people to know what kind of fruit that they can eat and reach out for if they're interested. Feels important maybe to start with the creative mentorship and mentoring, like if people feel that they're ready to take steps towards their creativity and find their voice, their prayer, their story, their dance, their song to be shared, that I'm supporting people through that process now with different lengths of time, but also with envisioning. So there's a creative mentorship, there's an envisioning mentorship to see the life, like we were saying, that you really want to embody, and then to take the steps to bring that into your experience and call that alive in your life. So those are the two ways I'm working one-on-one with people, all with creative, beautiful ceremonial holding. And storytelling ceremonies. I've got the last one happening in Devon tomorrow night. Been running these for over a year and a half. Beautiful, deep, sacred spaces with original stories and rituals. If you want a storytelling ceremony somewhere where you are at an event, I absolutely love it. And yeah, I'd be so happy to talk to you about how to make that happen. I'm taking the story from Medicine Festival and Tour to 4 different locations, end of October and November. So maybe you could put it somewhere, or people can just find me on my socials and check it out. The Legend of the Firebird. Really excited. First time ever I'm going on a storytelling tour in the southwest of England, so that's cool. Sacred Storytelling Retreat. Oh my gosh, this is happening in 2 weeks. It's now sold out, and it's just very cool. The next one is going to be happening, I think, in June next year.
Where is the Sacred Storytelling Retreat?
It's happening over at the Enchanted Glade.
Haywards Heath.
Glamping location in the Ashdown Forest, with a wild spa underneath, between London and Brighton. So that's happening in 2 weeks. The next one's going to be next year, maybe in the UK, but also maybe in south of France.
I've seen that on your website. Yeah.
Ooh, really?
Yes,
oh yeah.
on your website.
Oh my god, you checked out my website.
Of course.
You're on it. You're
Check
on it.
out
Okay,
Sam's
cool.
website.
Cool. And if you can't make any of the events in person, then I offer a 6-week flagship storytelling, Sacred Storyteller workshop online. This is the 6th round. I've had maybe 35 people go through this particular training now.
How long is that?
It's 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And it's a deep dive into this way of relating to the wellspring within you, clearing the blocks. We look at the rock people, one-on-one work with me to be able to shift those, and then you create and craft your own original story. And then there's a ritual around sharing it, being seen and heard in that container. Really transformational experience. And it leads into a 9-month mentorship, Sacred Storyteller mentorship. So I'm just at the end of 9 months with 2 groups, one in Australia and one in the UK. So I just wanted to lay that out on a platter and basically say, if you are interested in stories or ceremony or ritual or creativity or envisioning or living a more embodied and satisfying creative life, this is what I'm supporting people with now and have been for a while. But yeah, thank you. Please reach out to me if you feel to.
Beautiful.
Might catch me around a fire soon. Oh.
Oh, hey! Perfect, on cue. Maybe do you want to share like a story?
I've got a little story.
I know you've got 2 snippets on your website of All That You Are and the other one. The Dancing with the Trees or Dancing with Women or something about feminine.
I got a different one that I could share.
Yeah, beautiful. Let's do it.
I've like forgotten day and time in here. It's like a little vortex.
I know. This is what happens.
This is an original story poem called The Ancient Hymns. They say that there are thousands of ancient hymns buried in the ground. They're covered in bones and soil and debris. They're not wanting to be found, but they could feel the ripples on the surface of the earth, the humans' violence and greed. And the prophecy said that they would return to meet a desperate need. Well, things had gotten so dark on the earth, there was waste scattered all over the place. You see, the humans, they'd forgotten to care for their mother, and their disrespect was a disgrace. And so the hymns they started singing because they wanted everyone to know the keys to loving peacefully, the truth to help them grow. And those who were listening, with their ears pressed close to the earth, well, our great mother began whispering the many secrets of rebirth. This was a time of great healing, and our mother put out the call. And so many people began to gather in different circles, great and small. They danced around the fire. They sang into the flame, and it offered them hope and new ideas, and it took away their pain. Joy and peace returned, flourishing in their hearts, offering them visions of a different potential. It was a hopeful future at last. They channeled and created art, offering beauty to their great mother, and they came together unified with all their different sisters and brothers. These hymns now move throughout them, expressing themselves as love, reminding them of their connection to all below them and above. This knowledge is protected by the brilliant violet flame, so anyone who embodies it will never be persecuted again. So rise, all of you friends and family, with this love beaming from your hearts, for you are the hymns embodied. You are the hymns embodied, offering this world a brand new start. Thank you for choosing to be here in these dark and strangely beautiful times. I'm so glad that you've returned as pure expressions of divine. So here we are, together, on this earth with beautiful old rocks and sacred ancient trees, remembering to offer respect to our great mother, to love ourselves, and to simply be. May this story bless all those that heard it. May this story bless the one who received and told it. And may this story be a blessing and a gift, an offering to the earth from which it came. May blessed be.
You know, it's a beautiful story when every line could be the end. Because you're like, it keeps on giving. And it's just the perfect moment. Beautiful. Thanks for listening all the way to the finish line, people. If you liked the conversation, then maybe you want to check out more here. Thank you.